The 36th night. The following night Dinarzad said to his sister Shahrazad, "Sister, tell us the rest of the girl's story." Shahrazad said, "It is related, O king, that when the girl heard the third song, she cried out, 'By God, this is good!' Then she grabbed her dress and tore it, and as she fell down in a swoon, she revealed on her chest marks like welts from a whip. The dervishes muttered, 'We wish that we had never entered this house, but had rather spent the night on the rubbish mounds outside the city, for our visit has been spoiled by such heartrending sights.' The Caliph turned to them and asked, 'How so?' And they replied, 'O distinguished gentlemen, our minds are troubled by this matter.' The Caliph asked, 'But you are members of the household. Perhaps you can explain to me the story of these two black bitches and this girl.' They replied, 'By God, we know nothing, and we have never laid eyes on this place until tonight.' Surprised, the Caliph said, 'Then this man who sits beside you should know the explanation.' They winked at the porter, questioning him, but he replied, 'By the Almighty God, in love all are alike, for even though I have been raised in Baghdad, never in my life have I entered this house until today. I did spend an amazing day with them. Still, I kept wondering that they were all women without men.' They said to him, 'By God, we took you to be one of them, but now we find that you are in the same predicament as we are.' Then the Caliph said, 'Adding Jafar and Masroor, you are 7 men, and they are only 3 women, without even a single man. Let us ask them for an explanation. If they don't answer by choice, they will answer by force.' They agreed to proceed with this plan, but Jafar said, 'This is not right. Let them be, for we are their guests, and, as you know, they made a condition that we promised to keep. It is better to keep silent about this matter, for little remains of this night, and soon each of us will go his own way.' Then he winked at the Caliph and whispered to him, 'O Commander of the Faithful, be patient for this one last hour of the night, and tomorrow morning I will come back and bring them before you to tell us their story.' But the Caliph yelled at him, saying, 'Damn it, I can no longer wait for an explanation. Let the dervishes question them.' Jafar replied, 'This is not a good idea.' Then they talked at length and disputed as to who should first put the question, and at last all agreed on the porter. When the girls heard their clamor, one of them asked, 'Men, what is the matter?' The porter approached her and said, 'My lady, these men expressed the wish that you acquaint them with the story of the 2 black bitches, and why you punish them, and then weep over them. And they wish to know the story of your sister, and how it was that she got flogged with the whip like a man. That is all. That is what they want to know.' Turning to them, the girl asked, 'Is it true what he says about you?' They all replied, 'Yes,' except Jafar, who remained silent. When the girl heard their reply, she said, 'O guests, you have wronged us. Have we not told you of our condition, that he who speaks of what concerns him not will hear that pleases him not? We took you into our home and fed you with our food, but after all this you meddled and did us wrong. Yet the fault is not so much yours as hers, who let you in and brought you to us.' Then she rolled up her sleeves and struck the floor 3 times, crying out, 'Come at once!' And the door opened, and out came 7 black men, with drawn swords in their hands. Then, with the palm of the sword, each man dealt one of the men a blow that threw him on his face to the ground, and in no time they had the 7 guests tied by the hands and bound each to each. Then they led them in a single file to the center of the hall, and each black man stood with his sword drawn above the head of his man. Then they said to the girl, 'O most honorable and most virtuous lady, permit us to strike off their heads.' She replied, 'Wait a while until I question them, before you strike off their heads.' The porter cried, 'God protect me, O lady, slay me not for another's sin. All these men have sinned and offended except me. By God, we had a delightful day, if only we could have escaped these one-eyed dervishes, whose entrance into any city blights it, destroys it, and lays it to waste. Then he began to weep and recite the following verses. Fair is the forgiveness of mighty men, and fairest when the weakest man 'tis shown. Break off not the first friendship for the last, by the bond of the love that has between us grown. The girl, despite her anger, laughed, and, coming up to the group, said, Tell me who you are, for you have only 1 hour to live. Were you not men of rank, or eminent among your people, or powerful rulers, you would not have dared to offend us. The Caliph said to Ja'far, Damn it, tell her who we are, lest he be slain by mistake. Ja'far replied, This is part of what we deserve. The Caliph yelled at him, saying, This is no time for your witticisms. Then the lady approached the dervishes and asked, Are you brothers? They replied, No, by God, mistress, we are not, nor are we mendicants. Then she asked one of them, Were you born blind in 1 eye? And he replied, No, by God, my lady, it was an amazing event, and a strange mischance that caused me to lose my eye, shave off my beard, and become a dervish. Mine is a tale that, if it were engraved with needles at the corner of the eye, would be a warning to those who wish to consider. Then she questioned the second dervish, and he said the same, and questioned the third, and again he replied like the other two. Then they added, By God, lady, each one of us comes from a different city, and each one of us is the son of a king, a prince, sovereign, of a land and people. The girl turned to the black man and said, Whoever tells us this tale and explains what has happened to him and what has brought him to our place, let him stroke his head and go, but whoever refuses, strike off his head. But morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then Dinarzad said to her sister, What an amazing and entertaining story! Shahrazad replied, What is this, compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night, if I stay alive? The 37th night. The following night Dinarzad said to her sister Shahrazad, Sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your lovely little tales to while away the night. Shahrazad replied, with the greatest pleasure. I heard, O king, that after the girl spoke, the first to come forth was the porter, who said, Mistress, you know that the reason I came to this place was that I was hired as a porter by this shopper, who led me from the vintner to the butcher, and from the butcher to the greengrocer, and from the greengrocer to the fruit vendor, and from the fruit vendor to the dry grocer, then to the confectioner, to the druggist, and finally to this house. This is my tale. The girl replied, Stroke your head and go. But he replied, By God, I will not go until I hear the tales of the others. Then the first dervish came forward and said, The first dervish's tale. My lady, the cause of my eye being torn out and my beard being shaved off was as follows. My father was a king, and he had a brother who was also a king, and with a son and a daughter. As the years went by and we grew up, I used to visit my uncle every now and then, staying with him for a month or two and returning to my father. For between my uncle's son and myself there grew a firm friendship and great affection. One day I visited my cousin, and he treated me with unusual kindness. He slaughtered for me many sheep, offered me clear wine, and sat with me to drink. When the wine got the better of us, my cousin said, Cousin, I would like to acquaint you with something that I have been preparing a whole year for, provided that you do not try to hinder me. I replied, with the greatest pleasure. After he made me take a binding oath, he got up and quickly disappeared. But a while later he came back with a woman wearing a cloak, a kerchief, and a headdress, and smelling of a perfume so sweet as to make us even more intoxicated. Then he said, Cousin, take this lady, and go before me to a sepulchre in such and such a graveyard, describing it so that I knew the place. Then he added, Enter with her into the sepulchre, and wait for me there. Unable to question or protest because of the oath I had taken, I took the lady and walked with her until we entered the graveyard, and seated ourselves in the sepulchre. Soon my cousin arrived, carrying a bowl of water, a bag of mortar, and an iron adze. He went straight to a tomb, broke it open with the adze, and set the stones to one side. Then he went on digging into the earth of the tomb until he came upon an iron plate, the size of a small door, that covered the length and width of the tomb. He raised the plate, and there appeared below it a vaulting, winding staircase. Then, turning to the lady, he said with a sign, "Make your choice." And she went down the staircase and disappeared. Then he turned to me and said, "Cousin, there is one last favor to ask." I asked, "What is it?" He said, "After I descend into this place the iron plate and the earth back over us." But morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then her sister said, "Sister, what an entertaining story!" Shahrazad replied, "What is this, compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night?" The 38th night. The following night, the Naghzat said to her sister Shahrazad, "For God's sake, sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your lovely little tales." King Shahryar added, "Tell us the rest of the story of the king's son." Shahrazad replied, "With greatest pleasure." I heard, O happy king, that the first dervish said to the girl, "After I followed his instructions, I returned, suffering from a hangover, and spent the night in one of my uncle's houses, which he had given me to use before he went on a hunting trip. When I woke up in the morning, I recalled the events of the previous night. I thought that it was all a dream. Being in doubt, I inquired him about my cousin, but no one could tell me anything about him. Then I went out to the graveyard and searched for the sepulchre, but I could not find it, or remember anything about it. I kept wandering from sepulchre to sepulchre and from tomb to tomb, without stopping to eat or drink, until night set in. I was getting worried about my cousin, and as I wondered where the vaulted staircase led to, I began to recall the events little by little, as one recalls what happens in a dream. Finally, I went back to the house, ate a little, and spent a restless night. Having recollected everything he and I did that night, I returned the following morning to the graveyard and wandered about, searching till nightfall, without finding the sepulchre or figuring out a way that might lead me to it. I went back to the graveyard for a third day, and a fourth, and searched for the sepulchre from early morning till nightfall, without success, until I almost lost my sanity with frustration and worry. At last, realizing that I had no other resource, I resolved to go back to my father's city. When I arrived there and entered the city gate, I was immediately set upon, beaten and bound. When I inquired, asking, "What is the cause?" I was told, "The vizier has plotted against your father and betrayed him. Being in league with the entire army, he has killed your father and usurped his power and ordered us to lie in wait for you." Then they carried me off in a swoon, and brought me before him. "O great lady, it so happened that the vizier and I were bitter enemies, for I was the cause of tearing out one of his eyes. Being fond of shooting with the crossbow, I stood one day on my palace roof, when a beard alighted at the palace of the vizier, who by coincidence also stood on his palace roof. When I shot at the beard, the missile missed him, and instead hit the vizier and pierced the corner of his eye. And that was the cause of his grudge against me. Therefore, when they brought me before him, he thrust his finger into my eye, gouged it out, and made it ooze over my cheek. Then he bound me, placed me in a chest, and handed me over to my father's swordsman, saying, "Ride your horse, draw your sword, and take this one with you into the wilderness. Then kill him, and let the beasts and vultures devour his flesh. The executioner followed the vizier's order, and led me into the wilderness. Then he dismounted, taking me out of the chest, and looked at me, and was about to kill me. I wept bitterly over what had happened to me, until I made him weep with me. Then, looking at him, I began to recite the following verses. My shield I deemed you from the foeman's dart, but you did prove to be that very dart. I counted on your aid in all mishaps, just as the left hand comes to the aid of the right. Stand then, as one absolved away from me, and let the foes at me their arrows aim. For if our friendships you cannot maintain, between yourself and me there is no claim. When the executioner heard my verses, he felt pity for me, and he spared me and set me free, saying, Run with your life, and never return to this land, for they will kill you, and kill me with you. The poet says, If you suffer injustice, save yourself, and leave the house behind to mourn its builder. Your country you replace by another, but for yourself you find no other self. Nor with a mission trust another man, for none is as loyal as you yourself. And did the lion not struggle by himself, he would not prowl with such a mighty mane. Hardly believing in my escape, I kissed his hand, and thought that losing my eye was certainly better than dying. Then I journeyed slowly, until I reached my uncle's city. When I went to him and told him about my father's death and the loss of my eye, he said to me, I too have enough woes, for my son is missing, and I do not know what has happened to him, nor do I have any news about him. Then he wept bitterly, reviving my old grief and arousing my pity. Unable to remain silent, I acquainted him with what his son had done, and he was exceedingly happy, and said, Come, and show me to the sepulchre. I replied, By God, uncle, I have lost the way to it, and I no longer know which one it is. He said, Let us go together. Then he and I went secretly to the graveyard, and when I came to the center, I suddenly recognized the sepulchre, and was exceedingly happy at the prospect of finding out what lay below the staircase and what had happened to my cousin. We entered the sepulchre, opened the tomb, and removing the earth, found the iron plate. My uncle led the way, and we descended about 50 steps. And as we reached the bottom of the staircase, we met a great cloud of smoke that almost blinded our eyes. My uncle cried, There is no power and no strength, save in God the Almighty, the Magnificent. Then we saw a hallway, and as we advanced a little, we came to a hall resting on pillars and lighted by very high skylights. We wandered about, and saw a cistern in the center, saw large jars, and sacks full of flour, grains, and the like, and at the end of the hall we saw a bed covered with a canopy. My uncle went up to the bed, and when he lifted the curtain, he found his son and the lady who had gone down with him, lying in each other's arms, but saw that the two had turned to black charcoal. It was as if they had been cast into raging fire, which burned them thoroughly until they were reduced to charcoal. When my uncle saw the spectacle, he expressed satisfaction, and spat in his son's face, saying, This is your punishment in this world, but there remains your punishment in the world to come. Then he took off his shoe, and struck his son hard on the face. But morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then her sister Dinarzad said to her, Sister, what an entertaining story! Shahrazad replied, What is this, compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night, if I stay alive? The 39th night. The following night Dinarzad said to her sister Shahrazad, Sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your lovely little tales to while away the night. The king added, Let it be the completion of the first dervish's tale. Shahrazad replied, with the greatest pleasure. I heard, O happy king, that the first dervish said to the girl, "My lady, when my uncle struck his son's face with a shoe, as he and the lady lay there in a charred heap, I said to him, 'For God's sake, uncle, don't make me feel worse. I feel worried and sorry for what happened to your son, yet as if he has not suffered enough, you strike him on the face with your shoe.' He replied, 'Nephew, you should know that this son of mine was madly in love with his sister, and I often forbade him from seeing her, but went on saying to myself, they are only children. But when they grow up, they did the ugly deed, and I heard about it, hardly believing my ears. I seized him and beat him mercilessly, saying, 'Beware, beware of that deed, lest our story spread far and wide, even to every remote province and town, and you be dishonored and disgraced among the kings to the end of time. Beware, beware, for this girl is your sister, and God has forbidden her to you.' Then, nephew, I secluded her from him. But the cursed girl was in love with him, for the devil had possessed her and made the affair attractive in her eyes. When they saw that I had separated them from each other, he built and prepared this subterranean place, dug up the well, and brought whatever they needed of provisions and the like, as you see. Then, taking advantage of my going to hunt, he took his sister and did what you saw him do. He believed that he would be enjoying her for a long time, and that the Almighty God would not be mindful of their deed. Then he wept, and I wept with him. Then he looked at me and said, 'You are my son in his place,' and when he thought of what had happened to his 2 children, his brother's murder, and the loss of my eye, he wept again, and I wept with him, over the trials of life and the misfortunes of this world. Then we climbed out of the tomb, and I replaced the iron plate cover over my cousin and his sister, and without being detected by anyone, we returned home. But hardly had we sat down when we heard the sounds of kettle drums, little drums and trumpets, the din of men, the clanking of beads, the neighing of horses, and the orders to line up for battle. While the world became clouded with dust raised by the galloping of horses and the tramping of men, we were bewildered and startled, and when we asked, we were told that the vizier who had usurped my father's kingdom had levied his soldiers and prepared his armies, and taking a host of Bedouins into service, had invaded us with armies like the desert sand, whom no one could count and no one could withstand. They took the city by surprise, and the citizens, being unable to oppose them, surrendered the place to the vizier. My uncle was slain, and I escaped to the outskirts of the city, thinking to myself, if I fall into the vizier's hands, he will kill me, and kill Zaire, my father's swordsman. My sorrows were renewed and my anxiety grew, as I pondered over what had happened to my uncle and my cousins, and over the loss of my eye, and I wept bitterly. I asked myself, what is to be done? If I show myself in public, the people of my city and all my father's soldiers will recognize me, as they recognize the sun, and will try to win favor with the vizier by killing me. I could think of no way to escape and save my life, except to shave my beard and eyebrows. I did so, changed my clothes for those of a mendicant, and assumed the life of a dervish. Then I left the city, undetected by anyone, and journeyed to this country, with the intention of reaching Baghdad, hoping that I might be fortunate to find someone who would assist me to the presence of the commander of the faithful, the vice-regent of the Supreme Lord, so that I might tell him my tale and lay my case before him. I arrived this very night, and as I stood in doubt at the city gate, not knowing where I should go, this dervish by my side approached me, showing the signs of travel, and greeted me. I asked him, "Are you a stranger?" And when he replied, "Yes," I said, "I too am a stranger." As we were talking, These other dervish by our side joined us at the gate, greeted us, and said, I am a stranger. We replied, We are strangers too. Then the three of us walked as night overtook us, 3 strangers who did not know where to go. But God drove us to your house, and you were kind and generous enough to let us in, and help me forget the loss of my eye, and the shaving off of my beard. The girl said to him, Stroke your head and go. He replied, By God, I will not go until I hear the tales of the others. But morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then Dinarzad said, Sister, what an entertaining story! Shahrazad replied, What is this, compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night, if the king spares me and lets me live? The king said to himself, By God, I shall not postpone her execution until I hear the tales of the dervishes and the girls, then have her put to death like the rest. The 40th night. The following night, Dinarzad said to her sister Shahrazad, Sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your lovely little tales. Shahrazad replied, with the greatest pleasure. It is related, O happy king, that those who were present marveled at the tale of the first dervish. The caliph said to Jafar, In all my life I have never heard a stranger tale. Then the second dervish came forward and said, The second dervish's tale. By God, my lady, I was not born one-eyed. My father was a king, and he taught me how to write and read until I was able to read the magnificent Quran in all the 7 readings. Then I studied jurisprudence in a book by Al-Shtibi and commented on it in the presence of other scholars. Then I turned to the study of classical Arabic and its grammar until I reached the height of eloquence, and I perfected the art of calligraphy until I surpassed all my contemporaries and all the leading calligraphers of the day, so that the fame of my eloquence and calligraphic art spread to every province and town and reached all the kings of the age. One day the king of India sent my father gifts and rarities worthy of a king, and asked him to send me to him. My father fitted me with 6 riding horses, and sent me along with the posted couriers. I bade him goodbye and set out on my journey. We rode for a full month, until one day we came upon a great cloud of dust, and when a little later the wind blew the dust away and cleared the air, we saw 50 horsemen who, looking like lowering lions in steel armor. But morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence. Then her sister said, Sister, what an amazing and entertaining story! Shahrazad replied, What is this, compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night, if I stay alive?